everyone, it's Erin from the Provincial Farmhouse. In today's video, we're doing some French country wall decor thrift flips. My first project is this male wall holder. Now, as you can see, I've already painted it and stamped it, so this is a redo. I'm going to be using IOD's new conservatory labels mold. I'm dusting the ornate design with cornstarch and then working my DAS air dry clay into the design. As you can see, I'm working that clay in, but then I'm also using my fingers to pull that clay out over the edge. I'm then going to flex the mold and pull the design out. I'm actually going to make 3 of these to go on the fronts, and then I'm taking IOD's primitive mold. I'm rolling out some air dry clay, and then I'm pushing it into that beautiful delicate trim design, and I'm just pulling that excess clay out with my thumbs, and then I'm going to flex that mold and pull that design out. I'm going to be placing this casting down the side of my mail holder, and it's going to take 2 lots of this particular mold to cover each side. I then cast another one of the conservatory labels designs, the ornate design, and I'm going to be putting that up the top and then cutting off the excess. So I just have it peeking down from the top there. I'm then going to be using my Sealy's Quickset wood glue to attach each of my castings. I definitely recommend that you glue your castings down while they're still wet. As you can see, I am bending mine over some curves and really altering the shape of them. So if I was to wait until these were dry, these would crack if I tried to bend them the way I am now. So this is going to allow you to get the look that you want, and that clay will just dry and harden in place. You may find a little bit of shrinkage, but you will see shortly that I was able to fix that with adding just a little bit of extra clay. So definitely get those clay castings glued on before they are dry. I allowed my castings to dry overnight, and the next day I found that I did have a little bit of shrinkage. Some of the clay had pulled away a little, but as I said before, I'm just going to work a little bit of that same clay into those gaps to fill them in, almost like a filler. And this is going to make the look a little bit more tidy, and it's also going to give some more support to that clay so that it doesn't crack. I'm then going to come in and use a wet wipe to smooth out the clay. After a few hours, I came in with Paint Couture's Peace Mineral Paint, and I'm going to be giving my project here 2 coats of this lovely, almost French linen colored paint. And this is very highly pigmented, so the coverage is great. And it also has a built-in top coat. So once I've added my 2 coats, I'm not going to have to go over the top of it with a sealer that is already done. So this definitely saves quite a few steps. I'm using a pointed tip eco brush, and that is really allowing me to get into all of the details of those castings, especially the trim design that we added around the edge. I'm really glad that I was able to give this piece new life. It was a project that I did quite a while ago. In fact, some of you may recognize this project previously, but sometimes things just don't suit your taste anymore. So it's great to know that you can come in and add some molds and some paint and really transform home decor. Once my 2 coats of mineral paint are dry, I took Paint Couture's Stardust Heavy Metal Metallic, and I'm going to be adding it just to the beautiful conservatory labels design. Ultimately, I want these to look a little bit like metal plates, and of course, we are going to age them. So I'm going to continue adding this lovely paint, and it's only going to take 1 coat to get the coverage that I want, and just like the Paint Couture Luxe Metallics, these become more vibrant as they dry. If I inspire you to try any of the Paint Couture products used in today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would use my affiliate link. I will put the link in the description and on the screen, and I just get a little thank you from Paint Couture in return. Once my paint was completely dry, I took Paint Couture's Van Dyke Brown Glaze, and I'm going to be going over the top of the entire wall mail holder. I really want this to give more of a vintage look. I'm especially focusing on the details of the castings that we added, and then I'm going to be using a wet wipe to pull back some of that excess. I personally love a vintage and worn look, but obviously if this isn't to your style, you could definitely just leave this particular step out. Once my glaze was completely dry, I took Fusion's liming wax and I'm going to be adding it over the top of our mail holder. So this is going to give this piece a bit more of an oxidized look over the silver labels anyway. And then I'm going to use a microfiber cloth to pull back some of the excess. So this is just going to lighten it up a little bit more. And I really love this particular wax because it can sometimes give a whitewashed effect as well. It's very similar to white wax, but it's just a little bit more subtle. And obviously I already have the built-in top coat in the mineral paint that we put down, and obviously we do have the glaze there, but I'm able to wipe back as much or as little as I want. So if you are going to be using a colored wax, I definitely recommend that you put down a clear wax first or a clear coat so that you have more control over the intensity of that color. And here's our finished wall mail holder. I love how this turned out. Those beautiful IOD molds work perfectly with Paint Couture products. Let me know what you think of this project in the comments. For my next project, I'm going to be giving this frame that I found at the thrift store a makeover. I think I only paid about $5 for it, and to me it actually reminded me a little bit of a window. My first step is to take Paint Couture's crust medium, and you can see I'm just putting a little bit into a plastic container. I'm then taking embossing medium and adding the same amount of product to that plastic container. And then I'm also taking Paint Couture's pine cone chalk paint, and I'm going to then take Paint Couture's pitch black chalk paint as well. So we're tinting this mixture, and then once I have everything in that container that I want, I'm going to stir it really well and mix it together. I'm then going to be using a little artist brush, and I'm going to be brushing that product on, and also at times you'll see me doing some stippling. Ultimately with this mixture, I'm trying to create texture and age. I want this to be reminiscent of an old window that's had layers and layers of paint that have been affected by weather over time. So this is going to be our base layer. Obviously we're going to be adding some paint over the top of it. Unfortunately, the glass panes were actually glued in, so I wasn't able to take those out. So I'm just going to have to work around that and wipe back any excess. I'm going to continue adding my crust and embossing medium texture, and then now I'm coming in and doing even more stippling, and you can see all of the lovely lumps and bumps that are appearing that definitely look like, to me anyway, old paint. When that's dry, I'm going to take Fusion's toasted coconut milk paint. I'm going to measure out a capful of my milk paint powder, and then I'm going to put an equal amount of water in my cup there, and I'm going to stir it really well. I'm then going to use a chip brush to start applying that milk paint. Now we're going to just do one coat. The coverage is looking pretty good, and I'm just going to allow it to skip over certain sections of that texture. And again, if we get some of that paint on the glass panes in the frame, I'm not worried. This is a water-based paint, so I'll be able to pull that off with a razor or a wet wipe. So I'm really working it into all of those areas, making sure it's on those little inside frames as well. Once I have the entire frame covered, I took out my heat gun and I'm going to speed up the drying process. This is going to create some more texture, and it's also going to give us some of that lovely crackle that milk paint is famous for. When my paint was dry, I took a wet wipe and I wiped back the excess from the glass. Next, you can see that I have measured out some rectangles on my art paper here, and I'm just going to cut these out. These are cut to size so that they will fit inside our frame. So I have 4 of those here. I'm just going to cut them out. And then once I have my 4 sections ready, I'm going to be using IOD's new Lover of Flowers transfer. And I have quite a few little flowers that we're going to be adding. And I felt like these were a little bit like a sort of botanist look to them. I felt like it would look really lovely to have these on a wall, like a botanical artwork perhaps. I just cut the text from that design so I could reposition it a little bit better. I'm then going to peel the backing sheet off and then press my transfer down on top of my art paper, and then I'm going to use my transfer tool to go over the top of the design. Then I pick a corner and I start pulling back that plastic, going slow so that I can see that the transfer has released before I pull that plastic back too far. And then I use my carrier sheet to burnish the design more. So I'm going to continue adding the transfers to the paper. I did have a mishap with this design here. I ended up having to cut the transfer design out and reposition it on some paper, but that's okay. You can barely notice it. And these are perfect for creating your own artworks in your home. And don't be afraid to cut them to suit whatever project you're working on. Once I'm finished adding the designs, I took Paint Couture's Van Dyke Brown Glaze, and I'm going to put a little bit in a plastic container, and I'm going to add some water. So we're watering it down. And then once I'm happy with the consistency, I'm going to start adding it over the top of the art paper. So this paper can actually be used with watercolors, so it's going fine with this particular mix that I'm adding. So I'm adding it to the art paper, and then I'm using a wet wipe to dab off some of that excess. I want this to give the paper more of a vintage look. I repeated the same process for each of the 4 designs. I added the little artworks to the frame, and then I added the backing over the top. I did do a little bit of cleaning up there, so I just have to wipe that back. And then I'm going to take Fusion's liming wax again, and we are going to use this to seal our milk paint. Now this is already a light colored paint, so the white in the liming wax isn't going to show up too much, but this is going to seal our milk paint beautifully. Now you definitely need to use a wax when you're working with milk paint because it can sometimes reactivate when you use a liquid top coat. So I definitely recommend that you do grab that Fusion wax. I'm then using a microfiber cloth to buff back the excess. At this point, I decided I wanted to add a little bit more age. So I'm going to take that watered down glaze mix and I'm going to go over the top of a few areas on the frame. Now we have sealed this with wax, so there is going to be some beading of that product. It's not going to completely soak in, but that's okay. We want a subtly aged look. So I'm going around and adding it to some of the corners and crevices and just tapping it on areas where I think that age would naturally occur. I could have used Fusion's aging wax for this step, but as I already had the glaze mixture, I decided to just use what I had. And here's our finished botanical style artwork. I'm so happy with how this turned out. The Fusion milk paint pairs beautifully with IOD's new Lover of Flowers transfer. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. For my final project, I'm going to be using this little mini frame that I thrifted. I've taken out the glass and the backing, and now I'm just going to scuff the surface with some 220 grit sandpaper to give it a little bit of bite so that my paint will stick a little bit better. You could always prime the surface instead. I'm then going to use Paint Couture's pitch black chalk paint, and I'm just brushing it on and then dabbing and stippling to create a little bit of texture. So this paint is very highly pigmented. It only took me 1 coat to get the coverage that I wanted. Once my paint was completely dry, I then took a wet wipe and I started to do some wet distressing. We're going to bring back some of the lovely gold that's underneath. So I'm just going over the top of the ridges and any edges where I think that that paint would naturally wear off. Next, I'm going to use the glass from the inside of the frame as a guide, and I'm going to use a lead pencil to trace out the area that I'm going to need to make a mini artwork. I'm then going to cut that paper to size. I'm then going to be using IOD's new pastiche stamp. This is just one page and I really love these two little birds, so we're going to be using those. I'm going to ink up the stamp with IOD's permanent black ink. I'm then going to position that in the center of my paper and press down. When you're stamping, always remember to keep one hand in place holding your design down while the other applies pressure in other areas, and then lift straight up. I'm then going to use my hairdryer to heat set my ink because we're going to be going over the top of it with that same Van Dyke Brown watered down glaze mix. I'm just going over the top of the little birds with this particular mix, almost like we are painting them in watercolor. I'm then using a wet wipe to pull back some of the excess, just so we have a little bit of tonal variation. I'm also going to be adding the same mix over the top of the other bird. Once the glaze was completely dry, I took Paint Couture's Autumn Sage chalk paint. I'm just going to take the lid off, add a little bit of water to that paint to water it down, and then I'm just going to add it to the branch that our sweet little birds are holding onto. And again, I'm using that wet wipe to pull back a little bit of that excess. I then took a little bit of undiluted glaze and just added it to our birds' beaks and also a little bit to their feet. When that was dry, I inked up the exact same stamp and we're going to go over the top of our design again just to bring out those details once more. I then heat set my ink with my hairdryer, and then I took a little bit more of that watered down glaze. I did add a little bit more water to the mixture to make it even lighter, and I'm just going to add it to the background. Again, I want this to look like a vintage animal illustration. And that's the beauty of IOD stamps. They are so detailed that they do often look like illustrations in a natural history book. To seal my chalk paint, I'm going to be using Fusion's liming wax, and this is also going to tone that paint beautifully, give it a little bit more of a charcoal look, and it's also going to catch a lot of the details in this sweet little frame. So I'm going to continue adding that liming wax around the entire frame, and I'm going to pull back that excess with a microfiber cloth. And here's a look at our mini bird artwork. I think this turned out really cute, and I hope it's shown you that you can definitely make your own artwork using IOD stamps. I really hope that you've enjoyed today's video and that it's inspired you to use the new IOD release to create some wall decor for your home. Let me know if you had a favorite project from today. If you enjoyed today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would hit that like button, comment, and share it out. If you haven't already, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of our videos. You can find most of the products used today on our website, theprovincialfarmhouse.com.au. Thanks for watching.